Hey everyone, this is Brown at I Have Brown, and tonight we're going to be talking about the movie Zone Troopers on Blu-ray. Zone Troopers came out in 1985, and it was directed by Danny Bilson, and it was also written by Danny Bilson and his frequent writing collaborator Paul DeMeo. And these two guys had a history of collaborating together, and they got their start over at Empire Pictures. Empire Pictures was a B-movie production company that specialized in the sci-fi and horror genres, and it was the brainchild of one Charles Band. And Charles Band, like many people in the film industry, was influenced by B-movie king Roger Corman. And so Charles Band was wanting to form his own Roger Corman-esque B-movie empire. And so working together with his father Albert Band, he formed Empire Pictures. And so Empire Pictures has the distinction of turning out films that are nonetheless recognizable by mainstream audiences. Case in point, you have the movie Re-Animator, which has gone to be regarded as one of the absolute best horror comedies put to screen. And for director Stuart Gordon, was definitely a lightning in a bottle moment. And it also introduced the world to actor Jeffrey Combs. And so coming from the same director, you have the movies From Beyond, Dolls, and the decidedly non-horror film Robot Jox. And so all four of those films were definitely some of the more recognizable films from Empire Pictures that mainstream audiences saw. But you also had films such as Dungeon Master, Ghoulies, and Troll. And not to say that those three movies were particularly good, but they were definitely recognizable by mainstream audiences. But how all this ties into Danny Bilson and Paul DeMeo and Zone Troopers is the fact that the two of them first worked together on a movie called Trancers. And Trancers was a low-budget ripoff of both Blade Runner and The Terminator that was nonetheless a legitimately cool movie. And it also introduced audiences to the character of Jack Death, as played by actor/comedian Tim Thomerson. And it had actress Helen Hunt in one of her first roles, so there you go. But Trancers was definitely one of the hits from Empire Pictures, and a lot of people outside of the B-movie scene, definitely regard Trancers with no small share of fondness. And so, going from Trancers, Danny Bilson and Paul DeMeo would collaborate on, for Empire Pictures, they would collaborate on Zone Troopers, Eliminators, and Arena. And so Eliminators, I can say, is a legitimately, fun comic book-esque action movie. And so if you want to see, something that they did that was definitely a highlight from Empire Pictures, Eliminators is definitely worth checking out. As far as Arena is concerned, I haven't actually seen Arena yet, but I've heard decent things about it, so it might be worth checking out. But they also wrote the screenplay for the short film City of Lost Angels, which is the first sequel to the movie Trancers. We're talking before Trancers 2. But unfortunately, due to various behind-the-scenes shenanigans and drama, City of Lost Angels remained unseen for decades until recently. We're talking, it's one of the bonus features on the special edition of Trancers on the Blu-ray, so there you go. But basically, these two guys had a history of, turning out some, hits for Empire Pictures, or at the very least, recognizable films from Empire Pictures that even mainstream, audiences remember seeing. So outside of Empire Pictures, the two of them worked together on the screenplay for the movie The Rocketeer, which is definitely one of the coolest, comic book films from the 90s, at least in my opinion, but it was definitely, a hit with audiences. And so if anyone from Arrow Video is listening, Rocketeer needs your attention, guys. It needs the full, red carpet treatment. It needs some bonus features, for sure. But, yeah. So they also did this work together on the screenplay for Spike Lee's movie The Five Bloods, and I haven't actually seen that particular film, but I've heard good things about it. So on the more mainstream side of things, The Five Bloods is probably worth checking out. But they also worked together in the realm of television. They did a lot of the scripts for the TV show The Flash, not the CW version, but the 90s version. And they also did a lot of writing for the shows Viper and The Sentinel. So if you watched a lot of TV back in the 90s on Channel 21, Viper and The Sentinel turned up a lot. So there you go. But as far as, say, the gamer side of things, they wrote the scripts for the games 007 Nightfire, Command and Conquer Generals, and Medal of Honor Rising Sun. And so I haven't actually played those 3 games, but if you're a part of the gamer crowd, you'll probably know what I'm talking about. I've heard a lot of good things about those games. So yeah, Danny Bilson and Paul DeMeo, they turned out a lot of stuff together in multiple areas, but sadly, Paul DeMeo passed away in 2018, so it's definitely a loss in the writing crowd, or for the writing crowd. But as far as their work on Zone Troopers goes, this was a fun movie. I mean, it's sort of like E.T. meets Saving Private Ryan in a PG setting. So, and it's also a bit of a Trancers reunion, because you have not only the writers of Trancers working on this movie, and one of those writers directing this movie, but you also have Jack Death himself, Tim Thomerson, playing the lead role in this movie. And you also have actors Art LaFleur and Biff Maynard showing up in this movie as well. And they were some of the main actors in Trancers, and they show up as some of the main actors in Zone Troopers. So all in all, I mean, it's a fun B movie that wears its heart on its sleeve, and definitely has a lot of appreciation for World War II era films and TV shows, as well as pulp science fiction magazines and sci-fi B movies as well. So let's go ahead and get into the story. So it starts off, and it takes place in Italy in 1944, and you have this group of American soldiers that are, of course, behind enemy lines, and they're lost. For some reason, they can't get anyone, on their radio, because there's this weird signal coming in that they can't make heads or tails of, and no one's compass seems to be working. And so it's bad enough that they're lost behind enemy lines, but then they're attacked by Nazi forces, and while they put up a good fight, everyone's wiped out except for 4 people. You have Sarge, Mittens, Dolan, and Joey. So Sarge is often called the Iron Sarge by fellow soldiers. Is played by Tim Thomerson, and basically imagine Jack Death playing Sergeant Rock from DC Comics, right? And you have an idea of the character of the Iron Sarge, but basically Sarge is someone who's been thought to have been killed in action on multiple occasions, but somehow just keeps coming back, to try and get his boys home. And so hard as nails, but with a hidden heart of gold. And then you have Mittens, who is played by Art LaFleur, who is sort of the unofficial second in command, for Sarge, but also, one of the few best friends that the Sarge has left, because a lot of, his friends have been killed in action, unfortunately. But, Mittens is still there. And then you have Dolan, who is a war correspondent who came to this outfit to specifically interview the Sarge, but of course didn't expect to be caught in an attack that wiped out almost everyone in the unit, and leaving him as one of the few survivors. And he's played by Biff Maynard, and so another familiar face from Trancers there. And last but not least, you have the character of Joey, played by Timothy Van Patten. So if you saw the movie Class in 1984, you have Stegman himself, the evil, guy from that movie, playing, one of the main characters in this movie. And, Joey, though, is actually, a good-hearted kid who, has a love for science fiction, magazines. And, he has a knack for, trading with, the other soldiers in his outfit, with, he's got, cigarettes, chocolates and what have you. But, of course, I mean, he's, not so thrilled to, be in a situation where he's one of the only survivors, but he tries to, put a positive spin on events in the sense that, he's got this sort of idealistic demeanor, basically, he's, holding out hope that, the four of them will be able to make it to Allied lines. And he tries to keep everyone's spirits up and everything. And a lot of that, I think, a lot of that seems to, come from his, good-hearted love of, pulp science fiction magazines. And so there's this sort of, golly gee appreciation for, whimsical fancies. And, that sort of, carries over into, say, helping to keep his idealism going. And so he sort of, manages to, help the group, keep their heads up and what have you. And of course, with Mittens, I mean, he's a bit gruff, but he's a good-hearted guy who, I mean, he has his own sense of humor about things. And, he and Dolan strike up a, good friendship. And, he lets, Dolan in on some of the stuff that went on in his life, both before and after the war, or before and during the war. And as far as Iron Sarge goes, I mean, he's at this point just trying to, keep it, these guys together and, keep them safe and, get them to, Allied lines. And the four of them, end up making a discovery, though, that, basically no one really expected to find. I mean, namely, a crashed alien spaceship. And it turns out, see, that the Nazis know about this as well. And there's actually a whole, camp nearby, near where the ship is crashed, that has been studying it, and apparently they're the ones who shot the alien ship down, and so they're trying to study it for its technology and everything, and our guys they explore a ship and they end up finding a dead alien pilot, but they also find signs that there was another passenger on the ship, a co-pilot, if you will. And soon enough, they end up, finding this co-pilot. And this little alien guy, sort of like a bug-faced fellow with a bit of, hair on its body and a silver jumpsuit, is the only survivor of the alien ship, and ends up joining up with the American soldiers. And this particular unlikely group ends up bonding and becoming unlikely friends, even though the alien doesn't speak their language and they don't speak the alien's language. But nonetheless, they're able to, become friends and try and work together to, try and, get to safety. And so, in the meantime, though, you have the Nazis in pursuit, not only trying to capture these American soldiers and interrogate them to see what they know about the alien and the ship, because, they've been able to get inside the ship and see what see if they've got any knowledge of it, but also they're wanting to capture the alien as a prize for the Führer himself. And so yeah, a bit of quite a bit going on as far as wartime craziness goes. But all in all, though, I mean, this was a fun movie. It manages to basically have this comic book atmosphere with this old school World War II environment. And one of the things about this is that, um, the actors, they all commit to the parts. Like, even though, they're playing sort of, I guess you could say, familiar faces or um, character types. I mean, the fact is, I mean, they commit to the parts that they're playing. I mean, you have Tim Thomerson knocking it out of the park as the Iron Sarge. I mean, he basically, plays, the comic book character Sergeant Rock, albeit with a different name, right? But he, manages to pull off, the tough as nails, badass, who nonetheless has, a heart of gold, that he tries to keep hidden. And, he, kicks ass and takes names, but he does his best to, try and look out for the guys under his command. And, he's doing his best to sort of adapt to this crazy situation because, I mean, he could buy the fact that maybe there's, an experimental ship that the Nazis have built that maybe is crash landed, or maybe Allied forces have built and it's crash landed, but he's not quite expecting, for it to actually be an alien ship. And so when he's confronted with, proof that, yeah, aliens were driving this thing, I mean, he's kind of like, okay, let's just keep going, people. But at the same time, it was pretty, cool to see him gradually accept the alien as a part of their team. And, they end up, he ends up calling the alien Bug because, well, I mean, none of them can understand each other, and the alien does look like a bug, and so, yeah, Bug. But I liked how Tim Thomerson, had it to where, I mean, he clearly had a blast playing, his role as the Iron Sarge, but he wasn't necessarily winking at the camera necessarily. I mean, he knew what kind of movie this was, but he committed to it and was, determined to make the Sarge into someone that, you bought as, well, a badass leader, who sort of, took this whole, space alien situation in stride. It's like, hey, he's still got a job to do, just it's a little more complicated. And Art LaFleur as Mitz, I mean, he was awesome in this movie. Like he was basically a jovial fellow who, he's got a wife and kid back home they hadn't seen in 2 years, and he's got some funny stories from the old neighborhood that he likes to tell from time to time, and he's also a bit of a crack boxer too, and hence the name Mitz, right? And there even comes a point where he may or may not end up decking a certain Führer. So that's definitely a funny part in the movie for sure. But yeah, Art LaFleur, though, I mean, he'd worked with Tim Thomerson and Trancers, of course, and so the two of them definitely have a rapport with one another. But I found it funny how Art LaFleur was Tim Thomerson's boss in Trancers, but this time it's the other way around. And so it's like they still have that vibe of, yeah, we've definitely worked together before, but, it's like they're, friends and, colleagues, but in the roles are reversed. And so I liked how, there's this running gag where Mittens keeps on, trying to, smoke a cigarette, because he keeps running out of them, keeps trading them for other things. But every time he keeps trying to smoke a cigarette, someone will say, "Hey, Mitz, you got a cigarette?" Or Sarge will come up and say, "Button me, Mitz." And so that means, "Hey, light me up, Mitz." And so he's like, "Oh, crap." And so he keeps having to, give his cigarette to, the Sarge or whoever's asking for a cigarette. And so he, rarely, if ever, actually gets to light up. And so that was definitely, one of the, funny gags, that turned up, throughout the movie with his character. But he also served to sort of, tell both the characters of Dolan and Joey about Sarge, and just explain why, he's such a hard ass. Basically, he doesn't like making friends because he doesn't like losing friends, as in he doesn't like seeing his friends get killed, which has unfortunately happened more than once in his line of work. And so there you go. So yeah, Mittens, as played by Art LaFleur, was another good character. And as far as the character of Dolan goes, the war correspondent, I thought Biff Maynard actually did a really good job playing him, because, seeing him in Trancers, where he played this, washed up, drunken former baseball player, there was a lot more comedy with his character in that movie. But here, though, he actually has a bit of dignity, to his character, because his character's a professional and he's got a job to do. But he's very friendly, very outgoing, much like a good reporter ought to be. And he knows how to, get information from the people he's interviewing, and he has his own stories to tell about, some of the stuff he's, some of the people he's worked with, or some of the stories he's worked on, and what have you. And so, seeing him, buddying it up with, Art LaFleur and Timothy Van Patten, he has a different chemistry with both of those characters. And anytime he tries to interview Sarge, Sarge keeps shutting him down, because he's like, hey, I'm no one special. I'm just, another, grunt just trying to get home, except I got a bunch of other people I'm trying to, get home to, make sure they get home to their families and all that. And so eventually he does, get his interview with the Sarge, and, it's definitely a moment that, showcases some good acting on, Biff Maynard and Tim Thomerson's part. It's a short scene, but, the payoff's worth it, though. And of course, I also liked how, as a reporter, he keeps on just bumbling into enemy territory, because he's trying to get the big scoop. Whereas everyone else is trying to say, hey, stay hidden, let's make a plan. He's like, hey, I got a story to, I got to write. And so, he keeps on going into enemy territory, risking not only himself but everyone else. But at the same time, he's like, hey, he's got a job to do. Well, you kind of buy the fact that he's a reporter in that case. But I also liked how, they addressed the fact that, while he is writing all this stuff down, especially about the stuff about the alien ship, and, well, the fact that they're working with an alien now, he actually points out, he's like, I can't write this stuff. The first person I try and sell the story to, they're going to, if I try and sell the story to, the people in the military, they're going to, lock me up as a Looney Tune, And so, I liked how he actually addresses that. So he's trying to do his job, and then he's kind of like, wait a minute, how am I supposed to tell this? So yeah, I liked Dolan's character. As far as the character of Joey goes, Timothy Van Patten, he surprised me, because the first time I saw him in anything was in the movie Class of 1984, where he is straight up evil. So seeing him here as such, good-hearted, young man was a surprise, because he has this sort of golly gee, innocence to him, and and a sense of humor too, and he's got this sort of he likes to prank Mittens every now and then, especially when it comes to trading and what have you, like teasing him about holding out certain things, and like chocolate or cigarettes and what have you. But when it comes to, say, his character's love for pulp science fiction magazines, Timothy Van Patten just sells it. And it's like, here he is, looking at this magazine, and he's got to be 20 something, but nonetheless, he has the enthusiasm of a kid, and coming from someone who's also a fan of comic books, I mean, I respect that. I appreciate it when, someone's enthusiasm for, something like that, manages to shine through and come across as real, But one of the things that I really liked about his character is his camaraderie with the alien, with Bug, if you will. Because him being a fan of science fiction stories, I mean, this is a dream come true for him. So it's insane enough that he's the one who stumbles upon the alien ship first, and he's getting to explore it, right? And he's just so excited and, just like a kid in a candy store. But when he actually gets to meet the alien, it's like, this is beyond a dream come true for him. And he's the one who, goes out of his way to, make friends with Bug. And, and Bug's basically the one, and as a result, Bug basically trusts, Joey the most out of, the four guys. And of course, I mean, Bug, comes to, trust all of them, but Joey, though, it's the one that, forms the closest connection to. And so, Timothy Van Patten, though, I mean, he has this innocence that doesn't come across as smarmy at all. It's a rather endearing innocence. And also, just the fact that, he's trying to keep, everyone else's, spirits up. I mean, it's like, this is someone that, you're wanting to see him, come out okay. I mean, you're wanting to see all these guys come out okay, but him especially, though, I mean, just because he comes across as so good-hearted. And so, definitely a surprise on Timothy Van Patten's part. As far as the alien, the alien was played by someone named William Paulson. Unfortunately, I don't know a whole lot about that particular actor, but he does a good job of playing the alien in the sense of like physical mannerisms and what have you. I mean, nothing like say Jeff Bridges as Starman or anything like that, but considering that he's in a costume, like he's able to sell certain emotions, like say alarm or nervousness or joy, because it's like, here he is, I mean, an alien far from home, basically being hunted down by the Nazis, and yet starting to become friends with these Americans that are trying to keep him safe and everything, or keep the aliens safe. Well, I'm sorry. I was when I say him, I was talking. I guess I was thinking of the actor, but the alien, it. So William Paulson, I thought did a pretty good job with the part. But then again, when it comes to say the alien, like a lot of that I think has to do more so with say the makeup and costume design by John Carl Buechler and his makeup effects crew. Because like it's low budget enough to where it's like, okay, it's not out of place in a B movie, but there's enough effort put into say realizing the alien, like to where, I mean, making it one actually look like an alien, like from say Pulp science fiction magazines, but at the same time having enough articulation to the face to where you see like certain parts of its face moving. So like it's a guy wearing in a suit wearing a mask, but because of the fact that there's enough effort put into bringing the alien to life, courtesy of John Carl Buechler and his makeup effects team, the alien comes across as a character that's believable within the context of the movie, of course. And the alien, this Bug, if you will, it becomes a character that is endearing in its own way. And there's a nice little scene where Joey and and Mittens are, trying to, find out what the alien eats, and because it doesn't like any of their sea rats. But then they accidentally find out that it likes to eat cigarettes, namely because it likes tobacco. So you have little funny moments like that, and you have like this nice little bit, where it's trying to, ask them for more cigarettes, and so it trades them this little gadget that, basically, if one of them is thinking of that, like they miss being with women, right, because they're far from home and everything, and so it's this one character's holding this gadget that the bug gave them, and next thing this woman pops up, and she looks like the woman from I forgot the character's name, but from Who Framed Roger Rabbit. But imagine wearing a green dress instead of a red dress, right? So yeah, so you have little moments where the alien is able to use some of its technology to where we kind of it kind of adds to the whole comic book vibe of the story. I mean, because here, I mean, it's clearly a B movie and everything, but some of the gadgets that it has, for such as that little thought realizing device, that it only has a limited use, mind you, but it also has a couple of devices that it uses to vaporize oncoming enemy fire and stuff like that. But the way the effects are done, it's like they're drawn in almost, and that kind of harkens back to that old science fiction film vibe, because if we're talking like films from the 50s or 60s, you had a lot of drawn in laser effects and things like that when you have aliens with ray guns. And so, well, you have an alien with eventually a ray gun. And so a lot of these effects, while they look cheap and cheesy on screen, they actually work in the story's favor, because this is supposed to be sort of a throwback to the pulp sci-fi magazines and World War II TV shows and movies of old. And so there is that sort of inherent cheesiness that comes from the older things, but this 80s movie using such low budget special effects, it actually works out, and it doesn't work against the movie. So I thought that was nice how it all worked out. Whereas I think if they had tried to spruce the special effects up some more to where it looked quote unquote realistic, it might have worked against the movie, because it would have taken us out of that sort of comic book innocence that the movie is going for, or that comic book fantasy feel that the movie's going for. That's a better word for it. Fantasy, not innocence. As far as like say the action and all that, it's once again we're going for low budget World War II action sci-fi stuff here. So you have American forces fighting Nazi forces, and so there's a lot of bombs and gunfire. But then of course when you have an alien or a few other aliens thrown into the mix, and you have ray guns thrown in, so it all looks like old World War II or science fiction stuff from a long time ago, and it doesn't feel out of place in the movie. So while it might look cheap, it's something that you kind of like, okay, this is just a part of the package, and this isn't a fault of the movie. Like, it's actually something that works in the movie's favor. And one of the things I appreciate about the action scenes is that while this is, some World War II stuff, I mean, it's something that isn't, say, all out violent, like, say, Saving Private Ryan. Like, this is something that, a family could watch, if that makes sense, as far as, the violence on screen goes, because you see, little to no blood, which I thought was, actually pretty impressive. I mean, but then again, because of the type of movie we're going for, I mean, it makes sense. And one of the other things I liked about the movie is that, while because of, the type of story they're going for, I mean, the good guys are going to come out on top in the end, but I do like the fact that they do touch on, the reality of war here and there. I mean, of course you have, the bit at the beginning where where everyone but the four main characters are killed. So just because, the Americans are the good guys, that doesn't guarantee that they're going to survive, the film, right? But on the other hand, I also like, the aforementioned, scene where, Iron Sarge, finally, talks to Dolan and, has that short little, bit where, he tells him, his real thoughts on, his reputation and everything. And he basically thinks it's a bunch of hooey. He's like, and because, I mean, he's been killed, so many times, but he's like, it wasn't, luck. It wasn't a guardian angel. It was just training and this. And he points at his helmet and he's saying, I'm no one special. I'm just, regular grunt like everyone else. And so I liked this scene, because, the way Tim Thomerson played it, it felt, like an authentic, moment in a World War II setting that, you'd find in something that's a lot more serious than this particular movie. So it did sort of, remind us that war is hell in some ways. And one of the other things I liked about it is that while the good guys do come out on top, not everyone makes it out alive at the end of the movie. And so I do like the fact that they sort of reinforce the fact that, yes, this is, a family-friendly sci-fi World War II movie, but at the end of the day, well, it is a World War II movie. People are going to die. So I did like the fact that they at least went with that. A bit of realism in that regard. So the only things I could think of that work against the movie's favor are, say, well, like on one hand, I like the character of Bug. I mean, Bug itself, I mean, was a good, endearing, fun character, and the character looks good for a low budget, and this funny personality that this quirky personality that it has is all the more endearing and everything. And so we definitely buy Bug as a part of this makeshift team, right? So I didn't have any problem with Bug, but it does come a point in the movie where other members of its race come in, kind of like reinforcements, right? Sort of like in a third act, and there is an explanation as to why they look different, why Bug looks a certain way, like looks more like a bug, and its fellow members of its race that show up, well, they look more like humans, except with blue skin and blonde hair, or as Tim Thomerson says in an interview on the special features, and he describes them as futuristic hairdressers. So I did appreciate that, like, there is a brief explanation as to why they look so different from each other, but it would have been nice to have seen, like, say, some of their background explored, like especially when, say, once these alien reinforcements come in, they have a translator device, like you put it up to your ear, and eventually they're able to, understand what the humans are saying, and so on and so forth. And of course, you get the idea that Bug, tells them what's been going on and everything. But I would have liked to have seen more in the way of, say, conversation with, say, the aliens and the American soldiers, by way of, the translation devices. I mean, because I feel like there was a missed opportunity there where, while yes, these aliens are on a rescue mission, for one of their own, I mean, it would have been fascinating to see, some moments exploring their culture. Like, if the soldiers, especially, the war correspondent Dolan, and I mean, this would be the interview of a lifetime, right? I mean, it's awesome. I mean, it'd be crazy enough that he's getting to interview the Iron Sarge, but then actually getting to interview an alien, that would have been cool to see. But unfortunately, we don't get that. Like, we do get this one bit of dialogue where, one of the aliens says, "We won't help you kill your own kind," as because there comes a point where, they're asking, for their help against the Nazis. And so, of course, then you have Mittens, basically, getting in their face and, saying, "The Nazis ain't our kind." And the way Führer plays it, I mean, it's a pretty good moment of acting on his part. It's like one of those moments that kind of, reminds you that, I mean, yeah, you're in a fun movie, but yeah, war is hell. Like, it's that moment, kind of seriousness that, pops up for a moment, So you do have that bit, but it would have been nice to have seen more interaction between the humans and the aliens. I mean, the humans, the American soldiers with Bug, I mean, that was all cool. I mean, I had no problem with that. Because neither of them can understand what the other is saying, but they form their own, camaraderie and what have you. It's very endearing. But I just wish we gotten to see, more of the American soldiers interacting with, the aliens that came to rescue Bug, and, again, being able to understand each other with the translation device. And, just being science fiction, I'm always a sucker for, finding out what are these alien societies like that we see pop up in these stories, So yeah, I just wish we gotten to see more of that, because, I mean, when they do show up, I mean, it is cool to see them, joining forces with the American soldiers to fight the Nazis, like with ray guns. I mean, so it's fun and charming in that sort of B movie pulp way. Sorry, but it really does kind of feel rushed. And to be fair, I mean, a lot of movies that came out of Empire Pictures at the time had a very brief runtime. In this case, I mean, you have 86 minutes for this movie, so there's a lot of development, like character development and plot development in the first and second act. But when it comes to the third act, not that the third act's bad by any means, it's just it feels rushed, and unfortunately, the aliens suffer as a result of that. It's like they show up and to help to rescue Bug, and to briefly join forces with the Americans, and then, well, poof, back to their home planet. Semi spoiler, right? But it just felt like if there'd been a little more time with the American soldiers, getting to interact with the aliens more, and vice versa. Once the translator devices, were introduced, I just think that that third act wouldn't have come across as rushed as it did. It would felt more natural, like, say, the first and second act were. But it's still a fun, third act. It just feels a little more rushed than I would have liked. But I think one of the things that sort of salvages that third act is the fact that, well, certain characters, like the fact that certain characters end up getting killed, kind of just reminding you that, yeah, I mean, people die in war, so that did sort of help balance things out. So I appreciated seeing that. But I'm going to go ahead and give Zone Troopers 4 out of 5 stars. This was a good movie. It was a good, fun movie. It was sort of a golly gee innocent, comic book fun, if you will. But at the same time, I mean, if you've got a fondness for old school, World War II stuff from back in the day, or old school science fiction stuff back in the day, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. And the actors, I mean, they do a good job of committing to characters to where it's like, I mean, yeah, it's a B movie, but they sell their characters, and they come across as all the more likable as a result. And there's just enough done with the aliens that, the alien angle works. It doesn't feel out of place at all, and it's one of those cases where if things had gone wrong in one way or another, we could have had a case of this alien looking, well, stupid, but in this case, no, it doesn't look stupid. It looks pretty good for a B movie. And so definitely some creativity put in, bringing the alien to life, and also just the camaraderie that ends up, striking up with the main characters. So, and also the production design on the alien ship, the people that put that thing together did a really good job, especially for a low budget, because on the outside, it definitely looks like a crashed alien ship from like those, pulp science fiction magazines that you'd, see from back in the day. But when they're exploring the inside of the ship, there's definitely a vibe from Ridley Scott's Alien, because, you have like, in that movie, you have, some of the characters exploring the alien ship, and they find the dead alien pilot. I mean, it's a rather, memorable scene. Well, here you have certain characters exploring the alien ship in this movie, finding a dead alien pilot, and it too is a memorable scene. So, very good lighting in that particular moment, by the way. So, but yeah, all in all, this was a fun movie. And if you're wanting to see one of the, good movies to come out at Empire Pictures, as well as, an example of, Danny Bilson and Paul DeMeo, doing a good screenplay together, Zone Troopers is definitely a way to go. Okay, so as far as special features, we have a wonderful commentary track by, director Danny Bilson and writer Paul DeMeo, and the two of them, you can tell these guys, have a history together, and they talk about how they got to working together, and their time at Empire Pictures, and some stuff before that, and even a little after that. But for the most part, they tend to focus on their Empire days, and the stuff that inspired them when they were putting together the story for this movie, and basically these were guys who had a love for science fiction and comic books and World War II, and just like, hey, let's just have fun, and they did it. And also liked how they touched on the fact that, I mean, yeah, the special effects do look cheesy, like especially like the laser effects and the being obviously drawn in and what have you. But I liked how they talked about how it just happened to work in the movie's favor, because it's supposed to be tapping into that old school sci-fi movie feel meets World War II. And so I mean, you have the drawn in special effects. I mean, while, yeah, I mean, objectively speaking, they look cheesy, they don't actually detract from the movie at all, because, well, that's what special effects from back in the day looked like. So there you go. And I liked how they went into detail on that, and they were joking about how some of the props ended up costing more than the actual movie. I mean, they weren't being serious, but they were just joking about how complicated some of the contraptions on the alien ship looked, and they were kind of like, yeah, I know where the rest of the budget went, stuff like that. But they had a good time making the movie, and they're very complimentary of the the cast, and one of the things you also learn is that all the German you hear in the movie coming from the Nazis was actually recorded while the movie was made in Italy. The German was recorded in a studio in America by 3 German-speaking actors, and so that dialogue was sent over and just looped. So anytime you see someone speaking German, it's actually an Italian actor with a dubbed German voice, and so there you go. And there's another funny story where they're talking about how there's this one particular Italian one of the Italian actors who played one of the Nazis, it turns out was a real enthusiast about Nazi memorabilia. And so it's like this one guy really got into character, like when he's interrogating and beating up one of the characters, like he was beating up Mittens, and they're pointing him out in the commentary track. It's like, yeah, this guy, he really got into the part because it turns out he was a Nazi enthusiast. And so we had this awkward moment where, I mean, he was a nice guy and everything, but he's showing us all his Nazi memorabilia, and we're like, ah! So yeah, so you find out some funny stuff like that. But yeah, it's just a really good commentary track, and one of the other things I appreciate about it is that they do touch on the idea that they had of when one of the American soldiers, one of the 4 main guys, ends up getting killed. They were initially going to have it to where the aliens use their technology to bring the guy back to life, but then they're like, no, we can't do that. I mean, we could do that, but here's the thing. It's like, we're doing this fun sci-fi World War II movie, but, at the same time, this is a World War II movie, and we need to sell the fact that, yeah, this is still a war movie. People die. And so I liked how they decided not to go with, the aliens bringing the guy back to life. They just like, hey, let the person's death mean something. So I appreciated that and the logic behind it. So once again, really good commentary track. Then you have an interview with Tim Thomerson, a sit down with the Iron Sarge himself. So this, I believe, was recorded in like 20. I want to say it was like 2015, I think. I could be off by a date or so, but so yeah, it was interesting seeing Tim Thomerson, looking, rugged and badass in the movie, and then seeing him, sitting down at the interview. You can definitely tell some time has passed, but I mean, he looked good for his age, and he definitely had a good time making the movie. I mean, you could tell he had a good time making the movie while watching the movie, but when he's, reminiscing about the movie, I mean, that feeling's, further reinforced. And, one of the things, he talked about was, I mean, he liked how, I mean, there was that, natural vibe that they had working together, because, I mean, some of them had worked together on Trancers, of course, but also just the fact that, he was someone who was really fond of, World War II TV shows from back in the day. And it turns out so are Danny Bilson and Paul DeMeo. So it's like they all knew where they were coming from. And he was talking about how when he saying, button me mittens. He combined a couple of things they saw from different characters in some of the World War II shows, I think. And it was like, the line of dialogue was from one show, but then this, gesture he makes, was from another character on another show. And so he just kind of combined the two together. And so as a result, you have this, nice little running gag where, Mittens, keeps on, being unable to light up a cigarette because Sarge keeps on saying "Butt me, Mittens," and so it's like one of the funny parts of the movie, and also you find out some stories about some neat or funny things that happened during the movie. And for example, like he was talking about how the person who was the director of photography was a guy named Mac Ahlberg, and this was someone who, if I remember correctly, I hope I'm thinking of the right person, but Tim Thomerson was talking about how this was a guy who did stuff back in the black and white days of film, and you just know that he had to be creative, because you weren't working with color. And so now here he is, working in a color movie, but it's a low budget movie, but nonetheless, I mean, he vividly recalls that being blown away at the work that Mac Ahlberg was able to do, with a limited budget that the people had, for the movie, and nonetheless, making the movie look good, like making, the outdoor scenes, I mean, look like, Italy in World War II, or at least, rural Italy in World War II. But when it comes to, say, the ship and everything, he was talking about how, impressive, the ship looked to everyone, because, I mean, it really did look like something you'd see on the cover of a science fiction magazine from back in the day. And it, for a low budget, I mean, it looked good. And he also talked about how, like with the lighting and everything on the inside of the ship, I mean, Mac Ahlberg and, the people working with him, tried to, make it a little suspenseful, and it paid off. It really did. Especially when they find the dead alien pilot, because you have that moment where, Joey, like he's in the shadows, it's in the darkness, and he lights a match and he turns around and there's the dead alien pilot right there. And it's a nice, moment, especially with the lighting and everything. So, that was definitely some, nice little stories that Tim Thomerson had to tell about that, but also how you find out from him and Danny Bilson and Paul DeMille on the commentary track that when they were filming the scenes inside the alien ship in the studio, Francis Ford Coppola just happened to be in the area, and he watched them film a little bit of that. So that was a nice little surprise, a bit random. And but one of the funny stories that Tim Thomerson tells in his interview is how during the lunch breaks that they had, when they stopped filming for lunch, in Italy, everyone gets wine. Everyone gets a glass of wine. And so you'd have some of them would be okay with the wine, and others would be like, no, it's okay, not so crazy about drinking wine. Well, it turns out, see, that Biff Maynard had a large propensity for drinking alcohol. And so he would go around and end up, drinking like, 5 glasses of wine, from the crew table, like during the lunch breaks. Because, I mean, you had some people that, didn't drink their wine. And so he'd be like, okay. And so, he would end up getting blasted on wine. So, and the funny thing is, it's like you look at him in the movie and you can't tell. I mean, he looks okay and everything. And so finding that out, it's pretty funny. I mean, just to find out that it's like, the the guy would be getting, plastered in between scenes on everyone else's wine, and they're all like, no. So yeah, I mean, Tim Thomerson, I mean, he definitely, had some funny stories to tell about, working with some of these guys, and he pointed out how, it was cool seeing, Timothy Van Patten, going from, the type of character he was in this movie, and then nowadays he's regarded as a top-notch, TV director. Like, he directed some stuff on Game of Thrones and Sopranos, and so, hey, never know, right? But no, I mean, he really did enjoy his time working on the movie as the Iron Sarge, and he's joking about how, it's like, hey, so if you got to see the movie back in the day but haven't seen it since then, I mean, pop in the Blu-ray, have some friends over, have a Zone Troopers party. so yeah, I mean, he really enjoyed working on the movie, and he's aware of the fan base, and he's glad that more people are finding out about the movie, because of the Blu-ray. So yeah, it's a nice little interview with the Iron Sarge himself, and I'm glad to see that this is one of those cases where an actor did a good job in the part that they played, but they also enjoyed playing the character too. So yeah, that was neat to see. And of course, you have the theatrical trailer. And one of the funny things about the trailer is that, you watch the trailer and it feels more like it's going to be a sci-fi World War II movie with a bit of a horror angle, because they try and, throw in this sort of eerie atmospheric music, sort of like if you've seen the trailer for the movie Alien. It's that kind of music score, except without the screaming, but it does a good job of building suspense and, making it look like it's going to be more of a suspenseful movie than it actually was. And so I like that sort of about face that it did, I guess, where a trailer showing one thing, but then you see the movie and it's like, no, it's not that kind of movie. It's a fun, comic book sci-fi action movie, So, but yeah, that was Zone Troopers. 4 out of 5 stars. If you made it this far, thank you very much for taking the time to check out the review. And if you got any questions, comments, please drop a line, let me know. And if you like what you see here, feel free to like and subscribe. So, y'all take care. Have a good night. Bye.